Hey everyone, welcome back to The Grind and happy Chinese New Year. Thank you so much for joining us during this time. So, we are, fourth message of this series in the book of Malachi. Studying the book of Malachi, we're talking about how God wrote a book of remembrance, that God remembers us. So, God is someone who remembers, he doesn't forget. And let's talk about people who forget, all right? So, let's talk about our experience with forgetful people. Like, how does it make you feel?
I feel it varies.
Yeah.
I mean, like, your patience and grace can only go so far.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, if it's like a one-time thing, excusable. You always have like allowance for that. But I feel when it's with someone who's consistently doing that, I think it goes down to how I value them, right? Are they really forgetful, but when I have their attention and time, they give me their all? Then sure, I'm like, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth waiting the extra hour. But if it's with someone who's like really flaky, then that mercy, that grace and patience just really wears thin. Yeah.
I would say I'm the forgetful person because I always forget what I did before, and I always forget what I said. But in terms of commitment, I do always honor them. But I'm grateful. I don't really have forgetful people around me.
That's good.
But maybe it's just because I've already cut them off completely.
Or you already forgot about them.
You forgot about them. Yeah.
What if you are a forgetful person because like you don't know what you forget?
Well, I mean, there's intentionally forgetting, and then there's like you just really forget stuff. Well, I would say for forgetful people, right? I think it's funny when it's like it happens to I mean, it can make for some funny stories, but if it's like stuff against you and it's accumulated stuff against you, then it's a little bit like, okay, does this person actually care about me? Does this person actually value me? Actually, what bothers me more is like flaky people. People who say like, oh, they'll show up for something and then they won't. Oh, either they forgot or they're like, oh, they changed their mind. I think that probably bothers me a little bit more. But yeah, I think, there's some people that they just don't remember everything, which is fine. But I guess if they do something to help them, then that's great. And then again, for some people, it's just unfortunate that they just, it's just the way they're wired. So, oh well. But I think the beauty of it is that God, doesn't forget. God's not flaky, which is great. And so, and in Malachi chapter 3, verses 16 to 18, it talks about how God remembers those who fear Him and esteem His name. And I think throughout every single message, we've been hearing about the fear of the Lord. So let's just take some time to break that down. What does fearing the Lord look like in our modern lives? Maybe we can take some time to discuss the difference between fearing God and loving Him.
I think I remember this was something I struggled with when my younger self. I was like, because I always was using fear as in the afraid fear kind of thing, and so that really stumbled me on how to understand this. And I think the way someone explained it to me was that you're just in awe of God. And I think how I progressed from that was that I started seeing how much I rely on God, relying in a healthy way, like not 100% dependable on God and on not even yourself or others, but in a very healthy way, of course. And so I think, I would say it's like, for me, it's like the way I would imagine, I fear how life would be without God, And I think that's why there's like a verse I really like. It's from Exodus 33:15, right? Where it says, "Then Moses said to him, if your presence does not go with us, do not send us up from here." Right? I mean, and that really, like, that's my point. That if God's not there, I don't want to be there.
I think in principle, it's the same. From Bible times to modern lives, we need to respect God as the sovereign God and know the consequences of sinful actions. So now I think it's the same. So stay away from sinful lifestyle, even if that lifestyle may be a trendy thing to do. Yeah. And I've heard a story in a similar logic. So a friend's wife got cancer, and she also microwaves her food every day, and the doctor said unofficially,
Yeah.
maybe it's best to avoid microwave.
Oh.
And even though microwave may be very popular,
Yeah.
and there might be no studies
Yeah.
to support it's cancer related or it's inconclusive, but then everything you can do, but not everything is edifying.
Yeah.
And so similarly, nowadays in modern lives we advocate a lot of freedom,
Yeah.
trendiness. You need to be close to the ground.
Yeah.
You need to be connected to the culture, but
Yeah.
at the same time, how does that translate to like honoring God?
Yeah. I mean, yes, Jesus, like, like connected with the crowds and like, went to their level, like, but then he didn't, step out of his holy place and be like, I guess live like a degenerate to connect with people, right? People could tell that he's still the rabbi, he's still holy, but he connected well with the people and he spoke their language, which was parables. And I think like what was really interesting, the verse that Pastor referred to in Deuteronomy chapter 10, I think verse 12, he said like, and now Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. And interestingly enough, I think like when we come to the idea of like God, it's like, love him. And it's true that some of us fall into the into the camp of like, starting to romanticize himself about like, like I guess it's all like intimacy, which is important. But then we kind of like lose the other part, which is like fearing him. And it's interesting how like I guess in Deuteronomy says fear him first and love him. So it's like you kind of need to fear him first before you love him, because in order to fear him, then you know him. So I guess it's like a progression, right? So I think that got me thinking. It's like, I think maybe all this time of like, yes, like, intimacy and everything, but really, do I actually fear him? Do I actually hold him in high regard, or do I not take him that seriously? So I think that got me to really, I guess, review as well. Like if I really feared God and I really wanted to know him, like would I not put his word, first in my life? And so I think it's something that was, good for me to kind of just like look at again. Like what does the fear of the Lord look like in my modern life? If people were to look at me, would they say like, hey, is Pet someone who walks in the fear of the Lord? Or is she just like, fluffy and be like, oh yes, love Jesus, Yes, I want to be known as someone who loves Jesus, but I also want to be known as someone who fears him as well. So the idea is that, one of the things that also Pastor talked about was, God pays attention to like our conversations. When we have godly conversations, it attracts, God, and because unity attracts God. So how does the idea of like God remembering us, like not only just like our prayers, our conversation, our actions, like how does that affect the way we live our daily lives?
I think the way what that sounds like to me, it's like as if it's like you find out how a friend talks good about you when you're not present. Like he's been talking about me.
It kind of like makes you feel good, like
right.
It's like
Because maybe I'm just a bit that skeptical person of like when someone compliments me, that I'm always like having some slight of doubt. But like when someone like talks good, like and I'm not present, it feels that it's even more genuine because they're not trying to impress you. They're trying not to please you. So it feels there's like some level of genuinity in that.
Yeah, just like what Pastor had said, your words, your actions will be recorded in the book, and also in Psalms or Proverbs, you say, like one dirty sentence cannot come out from your mouth, something like that, and so I really do care about like what I do here now, because I don't want to at the end, when we get judged and all these dirty things, all these sinful things and words come out, and like really shameful moment.
Have you seen those reels where it's like they play something that is it's a little bit like either sad or slightly offensive, that's pretty funny, and then they follow it with like someone like trying like to like hold back their laugh, and there's like the Jesus over their shoulder.
I've seen those remix videos.
It's like one of those ones where like they're trying not to laugh, but then they have like a picture of Jesus just staring at them, like
it's like, you better not laugh, boy, you better not laugh.
I feel like that kind of summarizes the question.
Wow. Yeah, because you have like I mean, Jesus is right here in this conversation as we were talking. Jesus is right there when we laugh at things that we shouldn't be laughing at, and he's eavesdropping. And I know like what it feels like for people to remember stuff that, and you kind of like, maybe I should not have said that. Like there was, I think, one instance where I said something as a passing joke, and then that person remembered it and brought it back, like to kind of like, you know, like, hey, like kind of like, and used it sort of like against me, and I was like,
Wow.
oof, watch what I say. So
It's like that.
yeah, that one.
I mean, sometimes verbal or non-physical actions are even hurt more than physical.
Yeah. Yeah, so people remember what you say and do. What more does God, you know, do that? So yeah, I think it's like, for me, it's to be aware of, not saying that, oh, I better not do this, better not mess up, because God's gonna, like, you know, remember it and write down every single bad thing that you do, you know. But it's more of like, how am I carrying myself well in God's eyes? If I revere him, if I respect him, if I hold him as, you know, like master of my life, am I living a life that is pleasing unto him? So the other thing that, you know, that was covered during the message, yes, our conversations, how do we speak to each other, how do we edify each other, hopefully like we edify each other, you know, being on the grind, and also to our audience as well.
Yes.
And then
Be sure you do that.
and then also, you know, what is it like to fear God, love God, or it's more like we need to have to fear the Lord. You know, that is important, because we tend to, like, you know, throw that out of the side. But the other thing to talk about is how, like, those who love God would also serve him. That's sort of like the natural response. And I know three of us here, we work at church. Technically, we're serving God full time. I mean, not everyone serves God full time, but like we are literally serving God full time. So, and I know all three of us, we kind of like work like more like, so like behind the scenes kind of deal. So do you view your service to God as something that goes unnoticed, or do you trust that he remembers? And how does this trust shape your attitude towards service?
Well, it's definitely unnoticed to people.
Yeah.
Unless something goes wrong and everybody
looks at you. There's so many memes, you know, so many memes about that.
Yeah, but intellectually, I know God remembers.
Yeah.
But then emotionally, like what Pastor had said, what about the reward now?
Yeah. I feel you.
I think there was a time where I feel, actually, yeah, all of us at one point thought our efforts were going unnoticed. I think especially when we were expecting to see the fruits of our efforts, because I think, and God taught me the lesson and gave me an answer to get out of this kind of hole is when I was on missions once. I was in Lebanon, and basically there's a rule there that you're not allowed to talk about Christianity in public spaces. Right? If you approach someone like quietly on a one-on-one on the streets and they don't like it, they can report you and bye-bye, you know. And so like we really struggled to like how do you do a mission trip if you're not even allowed to talk about Jesus. And so we were only limited to the areas of where we were welcomed into like private places. But then, so yeah, my team was there for like 2 weeks, and every day we were doing something, but we were debriefing at the very end, and we were like, did we really have an impact here? Like, one of our locations was like a government school, but that's still considered public, and so we weren't allowed to preach. So we ended up teaching them like self-defense, because the culture there is pretty unbalanced, right? And so we're trying to, like, we're missionaries, but we're teaching self-defense in the house. Like, I was like, did we really do anything here? And I think God really just helped me understand this by, he gave me this picture where, you know, me and my team, we are hiking like in the mountains where there's snow, and then God says, I want an avalanche. So what we do is we stomp our feet, but then as much as we stomp, no avalanche is triggered, right? So we could go off the mountain disappointed, right? But then let's say hypothetically that another team comes and do the exact same thing, and they start the avalanche, but then they would not have gotten it if we didn't stomp it in the first place. And so then that gave me so much clarity that's kind of, so that's kind of what I wrote, that faith is like working and not expecting to see an outcome of your efforts. And I just like that's kind of how I help myself justify those moments, or like it's for God's big picture.
Yeah, because if we kind of wanted to, well, I was watching another like thing online yesterday, and this person's like, when you plant a seed, it is impossible to expect fruit the next day. Like that's just not normal, and it will take time. And so sometimes, like, yes, our service to the Lord, the results of what we see takes time, and yes, maybe people will not notice, but God notices, right? And I think God is a God who is faithful, and God remembers those who fear him and serve him. And I know there's been times where I'm like, Lord, I've served you all these years, like, why does this work out, or why does this not work out? Why does this have to happen to this person who served you all these years? And I think it becomes very like me, and very self-focused, and like entitlement, like, oh, because I did this, therefore I deserve that. I mean, I don't deserve anything. So I feel like sometimes I need, like, this was also another slap in my face, like, you don't deserve, like, it's you're not entitled to anything. And I don't want to be that whiny child, like, God, I did this, I served you for so many years, and why is this happening to me? Why I should deserve this, right? Like, come on, like, make it easier. Like, again, going back to, like, those who tithe would never go, like, they're not broke, like, again, what Pastor had said, and so those who serve will never, I think, will always be remembered by the Lord. And yes, the reward may not turn out the way that we hope for on earth, and again, what Pastor had said, like, what you seek on earth, if you seek rewards on earth, that's, I mean, you're gonna get that, right? So, like, yes, it's gonna be recorded in heaven. How it's gonna play out, we don't know. Just trust that God is a good God. He's a faithful God. So
I also think it's very natural, regardless of right or wrong, to feel why things happen, like negative things still happen even when we serve faithfully. Because it's like what Malachi wrote. The people, they feel like the evil people. They test God and they escape. Or even in our modern lives. For example, I'm watching the Netflix Drive to Survive. You know those Formula drivers, Formula One drivers. They are rich AF. And I just think, wow, like, this kind of wealth, this kind of fame is just unimaginable. And like, why are these guys so rich? Why are these companies, all the dads, all the uncles so rich, and they ride the yacht to watch a race car race? And then you look back to your life and you just wonder, like, naturally.
I mean, it's hard to connect the mind and the heart, right? Like you said, emotionally, like, the heart, the mind knows it is, right? And I think one thing that I do struggle with, and I still struggle with, is, like, my mom, served the Lord faithfully for years. She was a woman after his heart, and yet she was dealt with, a sickness that she's too young to deal with. So it's like, Lord, my mom served you all these years, and this is her reward. Like, and I would say I'm still struggling to connect the two sometimes. Like, I know God is sovereign. Like, every day that my mom is alive, God can heal. But then also but why does this have to be her portion on earth, right? I can question. But so I think this is something that I'm still working through. So hence the whole, like, Lord, we've served you, but why? So again, entitlement, me, what we deserve. But those who love the Lord serve him no matter what the consequence is, right? Because we love him, we fear him.
I feel there's a really fine line to draw of, like, when it comes to serving him. Right? That it needs to come out of the right heart. Because I'm reminded, like, as we talk about serving him, I'm always this verse just, like, terrifies me. It's the whole you come to, like, when God judges you, he goes like, who are you? He goes like, oh, didn't we serve you? But who are you? Right? I was
like, please, Lord.
But. And so I feel like it's such a fine line of doing this, and so
that terrifies me as well.
I was like, please, Lord, remember me, like, remember us.
And Jesus said, I don't know you.
I don't
know you versus remember.
Yeah, that's wild. So I think like we live in a culture that values instant gratification. Like people like to see things like, you know, they have the attention span of like 5 seconds. So for everyone who's still tuning into the grind at this point in time, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So yeah, I think how do we thrive in a culture that values instant gratification? I think it's like when we know that, hey, God remembers, and just to trust. I think it takes a lot of trust, a lot of faith. Yeah, because faith is what pleases God. And so, yeah, hard, I would say, very hard, but worth it at the end of the day. And finally, I just want to talk about like the two types of Christians that Pastor Red mentioned, which is those who make Jesus their partner and those who make them their master, him his master. So yeah, let's talk about that for a bit, shall we?
Wow, I've heard Jesus is my boyfriend, my friend, my provider, but I haven't heard partner.
I think sometimes we look at God as like, yeah, we're partnered with Jesus, but I mean, we're ambassadors, we're fellow workers, according to 1 Corinthians. But like at the end of the day, Jesus is our master. And I think, you know, the analogy that Pastor Ed used about like, you know, being partners, like it's like in the law firm, right? Partners means you're co-owner. And so when we put Jesus as our partner, it kind of puts Jesus on the same level as us, which is, yeah. So we are co-laborers in Christ, and we are his ambassadors, but he's never on the same level as us in terms of like, I guess if we had to put hierarchy, right? And so, yeah, I think when we say like, oh, it's a privilege to be doing this with Christ and like partnering with him, you know, yeah, I think it feels like it's nice to say, but also is it theologically correct?
I think that's just how our human brains try to understand it. Because like I guess going back to the whole like instant gratification, right?
Yeah.
I think like what my understanding of that, the way I would justify that is that I have a belief of God's gratification is better than instant gratification.
Yeah.
And like, so if we're using this workplace with God, right? It's like, it's much nicer to get your salary in one big sum at the end of the month compared to be small amounts every day.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, again, going back to the fear of God, it's this reverence that we have for him. And honestly, this like what you said, it's like a privilege to do this with God. I feel you could also say the same thing with workplace, that it's a privilege to have like a full-time job. Yeah.
I don't know. It's not even a privilege, it's an honor that we're part of this, you know, that we have God in the fact that we're able to, you know, worship him and serve him. It's our way of honoring him, it's our way of revering him. Not like, oh, it's a choice. Let me partner with you today. Maybe not today, right?
Yeah. I think there's just too many different relationships with masters, which is why this is a little bit challenging to answer. But I think the bottom line is having that gratitude in all of this.
Because I think when we think master, we think slave. And, you know, in this day and age, you talk about slaves, there's, you know, pushback, which is true because like slaves had no rights whatsoever, and like basically were treated like trash. So I think people like veer away from the whole like master thing. But the reality is Jesus is our master. Definitely something to think about. Two types of Christians: God, those who make Jesus their partner, or those who make Jesus their master. Yep.
And him being the master doesn't mean that you are a slave, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole prodigal son analogy, that the father was still the master of the house.
Yeah.
But still like loved his sons as sons still.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, something to think about, food for thought. You know, next week we're gonna wrap up this series, but yeah, I think throughout this whole series we've been seeing how it's having the fear of the Lord, and I'm sure, you know, it will look and it's important to remember that, to revere God first and then loving him. And then also just to know that yes, whatever that we do, it doesn't go unnoticed by the Lord. So let's continue to make him master of our lives and trust that, you know what, he will see us through, he will provide, and he will bless his people at the appointed time. I think that's the key thing. He will bless his people at the appointed time. Amen. Well, that's that for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.